We've had a whole 50 minutes of Philip Lowe live here on Sky News. He gave a speech indicating that the interest rate hikes has been 10 consecutive hikes since May of last year. Now it looks like that they might be coming to an end. He's described it as a pause and a month-to-month proposition. Let's go live to business reporter Edward Boyd, who was in the room. This is a welcome message for mortgage holders who've been hit with 10 consecutive rate rises.
Laura, this is great news for mortgage holders who have been hit with those 10 consecutive rate increases from the central bank, going from 0.1% at the start of May last year to now 3.6% yesterday. It's interesting to note that so far, from what I've seen, none of the major banks have passed the rate hike on to customers yet, but it's only a matter of time. But basically, Governor Lowe today really rehashed or explained his statement that came out after the rates decision yesterday, where he changed his language because a month ago, he had a very hawkish tone. He was implying rates would need to be lifted higher in the months ahead. Yesterday, that all changed. He said the economic situation is a little bit better, looking a bit better. The economic situation has started to slow down a bit. So in their eyes, the impact of rates is starting to affect Australia's economy and slow it down. So the rates are having an impact on the economy, according to Governor Lowe. And that's why he changed his language from being hawkish to dovish. And he sort of spent quite a bit of his speech talking about the strength of Australia's economy, the unemployment rate still at near 50-year lows, economic growth still ticking along at a reasonable pace, and wages growth not getting out of control. So it was a pretty measured speech from the Governor today. It was his first public speech of the year. Remember, the last 4 years in a row, he's appeared before the National Press Club in the first week of February, straight after his February cash rate decision. This time around, he cancelled that speaking engagement. He appeared before Parliament, before 2 committee hearings in Parliament a few weeks ago, but this was his first public speech. So a lot of people were obviously waiting to hear from the Governor, and he finally spoke today.
Yeah, we've got a whole 50 minutes of him, as I mentioned at the outset. Also, we look at the international comparison as well. We're looking at the US almost every day. The Fed Chairman Jerome Powell said interest rates in America might need to be lifted more aggressively than anticipated because a pause in rate hikes there has essentially seen a spending pick up. So how does that marry with what the RBA is doing here, also looking to pause?
Yeah, this was a really surprising one. So overnight, the chairman of the US Federal Reserve, Jerome Powell, has been speaking before a Congress hearing. He spoke yesterday and he's got another appearance today. And he changed his tone overnight and basically said, we're going to need to have interest rates a lot higher in America for a lot longer than anticipated. We need to get on top of the inflation challenge in America. But if you look at the fundamentals of the economies, inflation in the US was 6.4% in January. In Australia, it was 7.4%, so it's a bit higher in Australia. The economic growth rate last year is exactly the same, 2.7% in both Australia and America. So there are some of the fundamentals of our economies are similar, but our interest rates are substantially lower here in Australia than abroad in America, where they're much above 4. Just take a quick listen to Jerome Powell first, Laura.
The process of getting inflation back down to 2% has a long way to go and is likely to be bumpy. As I mentioned, the latest economic data have come in stronger than expected, which suggests that the ultimate level of interest rates is likely to be higher than previously anticipated.
So while our governor's talking about a pause, governors overseas, particularly Jerome Powell, are talking about accelerating rates. And one of the big differences is wages are a bit higher in the United States. They're a lot lower in Australia. And also many people are on fixed rate mortgages in the US compared to variable rate loans here.
Okay, what was the room like, Ed? Because it's not exactly, struggle street in a room at an AFR conference. We wouldn't expect it to be. But he knows, the governor that is, knows that he is speaking to a much wider audience. He was asked to nominate whether, on quiet reflection, he thinks the RBA board could have done things better. He said communication could have been better. I found that particularly interesting given, how much vitriol has really been directed towards the governor. He's meeting with a suicide prevention group as well this week, and he says that the board does take note of the letters that they get from everyday Australians writing to the RBA telling them how tough they're doing it.
Yeah, he mentioned the letters at his government Senate appearance a couple of weeks ago. That's the first time that's been mentioned, where he said he actually reads letters from the general public and obviously has concerns about the level of mental health in Australia at the moment due to interest rates rising. But also, before the government hearings a couple of weeks ago, he talked about communication as being something that he wants to improve, and he sort of went over that again today, saying communication has been a bit of a problem for the Reserve Bank. They obviously do a regular number of speeches throughout the year and have their cash rate decisions, but they don't do that many media press conferences like today. So what was the atmosphere in the room like? Well, the room was slowly started to fill up. During the previous speaker, which was the opposition leader Peter Dutton, you noticed more and more people were coming into the room specifically to hear Governor Lowe. They were all there for Governor Lowe's appearance, and as soon as he finished, a lot of people started to file out of the room as well. So a lot of national media came along for Governor Lowe's event. Obviously, everyone wanted to hear what he had to say. The room itself, lots of different business groups on tables, sponsors of the events were all there. Like, every seat was full while Governor Lowe was there. But you're right, a lot of the people in the room were the top end of town and not necessarily the people that are being affected by these 10 consecutive rate increases from the central bank.
Okay, Ed, thanks so much. Hit the buffet. We'll see you soon.